All right, everybody, welcome back to the Horn Takes podcast. This is Horn Takes Live. I am your host, Sean Redfern. Today, well, all week really, we've been talking about the running back room. How good is this Texas running back room going to be? Missing a couple of key guys from the team last year. We'll break it down for you. We'll talk about the week 2 opponent, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And then we'll have a little more discussion about this Horn Takes podcast traveling roadshow we're going to be doing this fall. Folks, we got 57 days until college football starts, until those Longhorns take the field to play the Rice Owls. We'll get you all caught up on all the position groups. We'll break down all of the opponents going into this 2023 season. We'll get into some discussion about how do we think Texas does this season, what games are pivotal for Texas this season. But before we get into all that, I want you guys to check out Twitter, check out Instagram. I got a Threads. I barely just got on Twitter. I don't know why I got a Threads. I don't know why I got an Instagram, but I do. I don't know how to use them yet. We're on Facebook. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. It's all at Horn Takes. So please, if you're listening to this today, you're watching the live stream, subscribe on the live stream to the YouTube channel. Find us on TikTok. Find us on Twitter. I would appreciate it. We'll be working on all kinds of good stuff for you guys the rest of the year, rest of the preseason. Man, the guys report in less than a month for fall camp. How exciting is that? All right, let's get you guys caught up with a little recruiting. Do the recruiting roundup. So we talked last show about these big recruiting weekends that Texas had 2 weekends in a row. The second weekend was star-studded. 5 stars, 4 stars from all over the country were there. Had a couple of commits. Had a lot of guys that the staff felt really good about. Had a lot of guys that a lot of recruiting analysts felt really good about for Texas. Lots of crystal balls going around. Let's get you caught up on all that. Since that weekend and since our last show, there's been 3 commitments for the University of Texas. Parker Livingstone, 4-star wide receiver out of Lucas Lovejoy, out of Lucas, Texas. Really long kid, 6'3", 185 pounds. Good speed. And this guy is like, Vince Young used to call Jordan Shipley ESPN. And that's because Jordan Shipley, if you threw the ball anywhere close to him, he's going to catch it. And he could make all these amazing highlight reel type plays. And that's why Vince called him ESPN. I think Parker Livingstone is another guy that's got a little bit of ESPN in him. He makes some you go back and watch his film. He can high point the ball. He can, really good control of his body to get himself in position to not only box out defensive backs, but get himself in position to make good catches, clean catches, and then do something with it after he catches the ball. His game is really versatile. He can get down the field. He can stretch the field. He can also play the screen game. And for a guy that's 6'3", 185 pounds, usually don't see guys that big that can take these little screen plays like he can and turn them into big games. But he's that kind of guy. Really excited about Parker Livingstone. The next guy we got commit from is Alex January. Depending on which service you looked at, he's a 3-star or a 4-star defensive lineman out of Duncanville, Texas. For those of you guys that, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably understand Duncanville, Texas. You probably heard of Duncanville, Texas. They've been in like the last, 4 or 5, 6A state championship games. Really good program. Coincidentally, I think they just finally broke through this last season to actually win one. They've struggled to win it, but they've gotten there so many times out of the DFW area, just south of Arlington, Texas. Anyhow, this guy, Alex January, is a 6'4", 325-pound defensive lineman. He is a space eater. He's a legacy at Texas. I believe his dad played linebacker at Texas. I may be wrong on that. I probably should have looked that up before we started the show. But he is a Texas legacy, and he's a solid player. Like I said, space eater. He reminded me a lot of like Mount Cody, except not nearly as big, right? The guy that used to play for Alabama, tore stuff up early on in Nick Saban's career there at Alabama. He's that type of a big guy that can eat up blocks, keep guys off your linebackers. He's got good agility as well for such a big man. Really excited about this commit. And then the third guy is a guy that, man, I put this guy's film on when I started hearing his name. I try to go back and look at all these guys and watch a little bit of film, right? And there's a lot of, there's Huddle out there. You can find some of these guys on YouTube. Some of them you can't find at all, which is kind of odd. But Jordan Johnson Rubel, 4-star safety out of IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. He's a native Texan, I believe, out of the DFW area. Moved out to Florida for whatever reason, maybe to play football. I have no idea. But this guy is really, really exciting. He's a safety. 5'10", 180 pounds is what he's listed at on 247 Sports. To me, he plays much bigger than 5'10", 180 pounds. This guy is a big hitter. I've said thumper, headhunter. He's all of these things. He will knock you backwards. So many times in his highlight reel is him, and he plays deep. He plays the deep free safety for IMG Academy. So much film of him being 12 to 15 yards off the ball, coming up in run support, and just absolutely knocking a guy back. That's this guy. I don't know who to compare him to. Maybe I know Bryant Westbrook wasn't a safety at the University of Texas, but just the pop this guy has, for you Texas fans, you should remember Bryant Westbrook back in the 90s. Just absolutely lay the wood. That's what this guy can do. And he's got really good speed, too. He's not just a headhunter. This is a complete guy at the safety position. I am really excited about this commitment. And by the way, we know these are just commitments. We got to get excited about something, though, right? We're 2 months out from football season. We have to get excited about just the commitments. The caveat to all this, folks, is that some of these guys may not stay committed to Texas. They may move on. We're going to hope they don't, because this is starting to shape up to be a really, really good class. And I know I said 3. I meant 4. Jordan Washington, 3-star tight end out of Langham Creek, Texas. I really like this guy. 6'4", 225 pounds. As versatile as a 6'4", 225-pound guy can be. There's film of him in the H-back position. There's film of him lining up in the slot. There's film of him split out wide. And there's film of him with his hand on the ground as a traditional tight end. Most of the film that I was watching right off the bat was all of these different, H-back, slot, split type positions. And I thought, well, can this guy put his hand on the ground and can he block somebody? And yes, he can. There's film of him with his hand on the ground, blocking people. There's film of him with his hand on the ground, getting out into the pass routes and making really good plays. This guy, much like JT Sanders, Jatavian Sanders, can get down the field for having such a big body. You know what he reminds me of? A little bit, maybe like a Lima Swede. Lima Swede was a guy in high school that I want to say played tight end in high school as well. Kind of played a similar role that Jordan Washington plays, really. They moved him all over the place because he was such a good athlete. He could get out in space, make plays, had really good hands. Lima Swede played wide receiver exclusively at Texas. I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Washington doesn't end up doing something similar. This guy, like I said, he can get down the field. He's got really good body control and really good hands. And the thing you got to love about a guy like him is he's not afraid to block. There's so many guys that are really good pass-catching tight ends in high school, but they don't have the blocking game. And that's the toughest part about coming to the collegiate level for a tight end. For someone that's actually going to line up at tight end, that's got to be the hardest transition. Is I'm not blocking like little kids anymore. I'm blocking some big old dudes that are trained and they're physically fit to keep me from blocking them. You're not going to see that a lot as a tight end in high school, but you certainly see it at the collegiate level. He can block. I really like the way he uses his lower body to block. He's good. This guy is going to be a really good player. Really excited about Jordan Washington. So those are the 4 latest commits for Texas. And now let's talk a little bit about who's Texas in really good shape for. So again, huge recruiting visit huge recruiting weekend for Texas. Lots of guys in. Let's go down this list of guys that right now today, these are guys that Texas either has crystal balls in, like recruiting analysts are saying, yes, we think this guy is going to Texas, or they're guys that the staff feels really, really good about, guys that have maybe made comments out in, in interviews and things like that, that would lead you to believe that at least Texas is in the running, right? Good shape to us means we're still in the conversation, right? So Wardell Mack is a 4-star cornerback out of Marrero, Louisiana. I hope I pronounced that right. He's a guy with a crystal ball. Brandon Baker, this is probably, from an offensive line perspective, this is like the last big target for Texas, I think. 5-star out of Mater D in California. When Calhoun committed to Georgia, he was kind of another guy, an elite offensive tackle that Texas was recruiting. And I think even though Calhoun had a really good weekend at Texas 2 weekends ago, I think Texas came out of it feeling better. I feel like the Texas staff thought we're close. We're in it, right? We're in the final 2, final 3, something like that. And I really do feel like that's where Texas landed. But Georgia was just too much for Calhoun. He's going to Georgia. So Brandon Baker is an important piece to this recruiting class. He's an elite 5-star offensive tackle. For him, it's Oregon, Texas. There's one other school sort of on the West Coast, and I can't remember who it is. But I think Texas is in really good shape with Brandon Baker. They've got to be excited about that. Jaden Jackson, 4-star defensive lineman from IMG Academy. There's a lot of guys from IMG Academy on the radar for Texas. I love Jaden Jackson. I talked about him last week on the show. This dude is an absolute wrecking ball at the 2 technique, 3 technique, maybe even nose guard type position. Really quick first step and just absolutely physically dominating. This guy, he is like a bull in a china cabinet. I think that's the best. I mean, if Wrecking Ball doesn't do it, Bull in a China Cabinet should do it. This dude, like where he's at, people are getting knocked around. Big people, large humans, strong kids are getting knocked back, pushed down, thrown to the side. That's Jaden Jackson. In some services, I think he's a 3-star. There's no freaking way this guy's a 3-star. He's definitely a 4-star. Fix his stars, guys. Colin Simmons, 5-star edge out of Duncanville, Texas. Another one of those Duncanville guys. Colin Simmons is you've seen Colin Simmons. He's a guy that he's the number 1 edge in the country. And if he's not the number 1 edge, he's top 3 edge in the country. And we're talking about splitting hairs, and it doesn't really matter. This guy's an elite talent off the edge. He's a guy that has been leaning towards LSU for a long time. Took his official visit to Texas a couple weekends ago. And since that official visit, all the talk, all the speculation has all been very positive for the University of Texas. I suppose we could get into a situation, a Ryan Perilou situation perhaps, where all of this talk coming out of his camp, so to speak, is very positive towards Texas. And then at the last minute, he goes with LSU. But I really feel like the Texas staff feels like they're in great shape with Colin Simmons, and there are tons of recruiting analysts, including a lot of the national guys, not just the Homer, Texas guys. Lots of national guys think Colin Simmons will be announcing at some point, and he hasn't decided when he's announcing, but at some point, Colin Simmons is going to be a Longhorn. Ryan Wingo, 5-star wide receiver out of St. Louis, another big kid, fast kid, top 5 type wide receiver in the country for sure. He's got crystal balls to Texas. He's the type of guy, much like Livingstone, real big body, but can kind of play lots of different positions and their game is not just one thing. So I'd be super excited if we landed Ryan Wingo. The last 2 wide receiver classes for Texas, if they can land a guy like Ryan Wingo and maybe have a chance with Micah Hudson. I know at this point Micah Hudson is a huge tech lean, it seems. Who knows what happens between now and December? If they can land some guys like that, wow. Just wow. Another guy, Kobe Black, 5-star cornerback out of Waco, Texas. Texas feels like they're in great shape with him. Recruiting analysts across the country feel like Texas is in great shape with him. Corian Gibson, 4-star cornerback out of Lancaster, Texas. Another guy that here lately, lots of recruiting analysts dropping crystal balls on. He is announcing July 22nd. What's interesting about Corian Gibson is he somehow is a really good friend of Jordan Johnson Rubel, who is committed to Texas. So they've always talked about, and there's lots of tweeting back and forth about playing together. So you got to think Corian Gibson is at least a Texas lean at this point. We'll see. July 22nd, he announces. Aaron Hampton is a guy that was committed to Baylor in 2021, decommitted from Baylor, committed to Texas in 2022, dropped his commitment to Texas in December of 2022. Texas stayed after him. He's a 4-star athlete out of Dangerfield. This guy, I think he had 1,100 receiving yards last year as a junior. Really fast, really elusive. And he's really strong, too, for his body size. I mean, he's 5'10", 180 pounds maybe. But he's got good power, good strength. The buzz is Aaron Hampton will be announcing that he is committed to the University of Texas again for the second time. Tonight, 5 Central is when that goes down. So everybody's always talking about when's the next commitment coming. There's one coming tonight that Texas is a big part of. He is supposedly choosing between Texas and Alabama tonight. Some of the Horns 247 guys say it would not surprise them if another team came out of left field. I don't think that's alluding to anything. I think that's just sort of pointing out that Aaron Hampton's recruitment to this point has been interesting, to say the least. DeAndre Robinson, big 4-star defensive lineman out of Orlando, Florida, crystal ball to Texas. Zena Umeozulu, 4-star edge out of Allen, Texas, crystal ball to Texas. Melvin Hills, 3-star tweener from Lafayette, Louisiana. I call him a tweener. He's about 6'3", 270 pounds. That's not a space eater type guy in the college game. He definitely has the body to be a space eater type guy at the college level. He also has the body where if things go just right and he can continue to improve his agility and his speed, he could be one of those monster defensive ends you see every once in a while at the collegiate level. That's a Melvin Hills. He does not have a crystal ball, but there is all kinds of talk about him. Actually, he does have a crystal ball to Texas. So there you go. There's a lot of guys right there, and these are all 4- and 5-star guys. I think what hurts Melvin Hills is his size. I think if he was, pushing 290, pushing 300 pounds, he'd be much higher up on the list of defensive linemen in the country. So just a few weeks ago, Texas fans are sitting there and we're going, man, what? And it wasn't like panic. I don't think anybody in the Texas fan base 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago was panicking about recruiting. But we're sitting there at like 64, the 64th ranked class in the country. I think at the time we had 4 or 5 commits. And we're kind of sitting back and going like, what in the world is going on? If y'all remember, Texas fans, if you've been a Texas fan long enough or followed Texas recruiting long enough, back in the day, Mac Brown used to have the recruiting class done in February. These junior days, he would have like damn near an entire class committed at junior day. And I don't know how he did it, but he managed to keep all of those guys in the fold 9 times out of 10. It was a gift Mac Brown has, right? So there's precedent for Texas fans to, National Signing Day was kind of like just a formality for so long for Texas fans. We knew who was committed. They'd been committed for a year and a half, 2 years. And all we really were waiting for was just to see on our favorite Texas Longhorn recruiting website, so-and-so has faxed in their letter of intent. It's official. And for Sark's classes, his first two classes at Texas, I think there's been a little bit of element of that. There's been guys that have hopped on board immediately and committed and stayed committed. And of course, there were some, late, I wouldn't call them surprises necessarily, but late surprises in a good way, right? Like, not like, oh, shit, we didn't think we had a chance with these guys, but heck yeah, this is awesome. It's signing day or it's a week before signing day, and we still don't know who all's in the class. It's kind of exciting, right? But this year, it seems like there's been a lot more sort of up in the air about what this class is going to look like. And in the last few weeks, this class has really started to take form and really give us a look at what we're going to have in this 2024 recruiting class. Right now, this class is 28th according to 247 Sports. It's got 12 commits, which if you look at the schools that it's hanging out around in the rankings, there aren't any with just 12 commits. So we're talking about a lot of high 4-star and 5-star type guys that are in this class and that are left to decide to commit in this class. I think ultimately, this Texas class is going to be a 5-star, or excuse me, a top 5 class. And it's going to be a class that, again, really fits the needs of what the team needs. We've talked, the knock on Texas for so long, you look at the past 10, 12 years, the knock on Texas has been, you guys sign these really highly rated recruiting classes all the time, but you don't do shit with them on the field. And to some extent, I feel like that is fair. It is fair to say, yes, X, you guys signed lots of really good recruiting classes, and Y, y'all never won anything. But I think what's important to look at is look at those recruiting classes, and did they really fit needs? Did they really do a good job of putting the right talent in the right spots, getting depth at those positions? By the time we were done with the Tom Herman era, the offensive lines and defensive lines were the most neglected, I think, you could be. Like, they were the most neglected position groups that a blue blood program like the University of Texas could possibly have. Not a lot of talent there. The talent that they were signing was not staying. And there was almost no depth at all. And if you look at the last few classes for Steve Sarkisian, Kyle Flood, Bo Davis, they have hammered on offensive line and defensive line. And this class is going to be no different. We talked about the timing of this class, how interesting it's been. It'll be cool to see. Let's just say all these guys are on board and we're waiting to see when they commit. It'll be interesting to see how those dominoes fall. I think a guy like Colin Simmons, I think Colin Simmons pulls the trigger and says, I'm going to Texas. I think that really is a catalyst to finish out this recruiting class just for the guys that we think are coming. But I also think it puts Texas in a position that maybe with a really good season this year, they might be able to flip some guys late in the recruiting process. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. I'm excited. I've been excited about Texas football. I've been excited my whole life. There was a stretch during the Chuck Strong era and the Tom Herman era where I got to the point where I didn't care. And it was probably the best for me. I think I matured a lot during that time as a football fan because I just didn't expect the team to do anything. So when the team played like shit, it didn't really affect me. I just went, oh, well, we played like shit. When the team did something really good and we beat a team like we shouldn't beat, it was very exciting. But I feel like today I don't have that sort of negative part of viewing Texas Longhorn football, which is very liberating. If I used to be a chunk shit, not like at the TV or at people, but just like frustratingly throw stuff, like let's say a beer koozie or something. Nothing, and I didn't rip TVs off the wall. I didn't like throw pieces of electronic equipment. Nothing crazy. Rocks. I didn't do anything crazy like that. But I would get very upset during football games. And I don't do that anymore. So before we say that Charlie Strong and Tom Herman did nothing for Texas, I have to say that those two guys taught me how to grow up a little bit as a Texas fan. I feel like I'm much more enjoyable to be around during a Texas game. You could probably ask my wife on that. She'll let you know. Position breakdowns, the running backs. Everybody knows about the great tradition that the University of Texas has with running backs. I think if Texas had had any sort of consistency since Jamal Charles left with sort of elite running backs producing, not just being there, but actually producing, because Texas has signed a ton of elite running backs. Texas has put guys in the league at running back. But if we had a stretch, if we didn't go through a stretch of, roughly 10 years, 8 to 10 years where we just really didn't have any elite running backs. I think you could argue Texas is running back U, and I'm going to still call Texas running back U. I don't give a shit if you don't like it. That's what I'm going to do. But you're talking about guys like Earl Campbell, Heisman Trophy winner, Doak Walker winner, Ricky Williams, Heisman Trophy winner, Doak Walker winner, Priest Holmes. Priest Holmes is a guy that had an amazing NFL career, and he had a really good college career, but he was there with Ricky Williams. Priest Holmes was the other guy in that backfield. Then you got Cedric Benson. Rest in peace, El said. Cedric Benson, another Doak Walker Award winner, 4-year starter, the only Texas running back in University of Texas history with 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. You got Jamal Charles. Jamal Charles, is Jamal Charles one of the best running backs to not win the Doak Walker Award? Like in the history of football? I don't know. Asking the question. Jamal Charles' last year at Texas was really good. He had some hellacious games towards the end of his career. I think against Nebraska and Oklahoma State, he had games in the same season where he busted off 200 yards in the fourth quarter. Deontay Foreman, Doak Walker Award winner, NFL guy. And now Bijan Robinson, Doak Walker Award winner, first round draft pick. Roschon Johnson, don't forget Roschon. I love Roschon. Texas is the only program in college football with 5 Doak Walker Award winners. So there's a tradition at the University of Texas for having really elite running backs. And we just talked about 2 of those guys. We got to be worried headed into 2023, right? We just had Bijan Robinson get drafted in the first round. Roschon Johnson, I believe, was drafted in the 4th round, maybe the 5th round. Doesn't matter. He was drafted. He's going to play in the NFL, and I think he's going to have a really good career in the NFL. So we should be worried, right? Texas fans, we should be worried about this running back room. Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, between them, scored 25 of the 28 rushing touchdowns that Texas running backs scored last season. I don't know the percentage on that. I'm not a super fast percentage guy in my head, but that's a lot. Lion's share of the touchdowns, lion's share of the rushing yardage is gone. It's in the NFL now. So we should all be worried, right? I am not worried one single bit. I think this Texas running back room is absolutely stacked. Jonathan Brooks is a guy, projected starter. This is a guy that had 30 carries for 204 yards last year, which is a 6.6 yards per carry average, which is amazing. I think he's the only Big 12 running back coming back averaging over 6 yards per carry. 5 touchdowns. He had a long of 70. And oh, by the way, he had 2 catches for 37 yards and a touchdown. He's a big back. He's a fast back. He's elusive. I think Jonathan Brooks is going to have a really, really good season this year. Then you got Jaden Blue, who's a former 5-star. Jaden Blue is a guy coming out of high school that didn't play his senior year, elected not to play. I think it had something to do with the COVID deal. I'm not 1,000% sure. But I think Jaden Blue decided not to play his senior year because of the whole COVID mess. And before that, he was a 5-star. Maybe rightfully so. He got bumped down to a 4-star. He had 15 carries last year for 35 yards. Not great, but you got to think Jaden Blue was in there with a bunch of backups playing at the end of the game. The teams know we're running the ball. Jaden Blue did not get any significant carries in any situation other than we're just trying to run the clock out. So I don't hold that low average against him. He had an absolute electric touchdown run in the spring game. I think it went for 33 yards. Yeah, he showed elusiveness. He showed strength, speed, like everything a running back could show in one run. Jaden Blue did it in that run. I'm excited to see him get some more carries. Keelan Robinson, it's a guy that been, transferred from Bama 2 years ago. He's as much of a Texas Longhorn today as he was a Bama guy, I feel. More probably. 25 carries for 94 yards, 20 receptions for 219 yards, and 3 touchdowns receiving. I love Keelan Robinson's game. He's a smaller guy. He's not a very big body, but he's got tons of speed, really good in space, and he can carry it. He can carry the rock back there. But the really cool thing about him is just in the passing game, he is so dangerous. Then you got a couple of newcomers. C.J. Baxter, who's the number 1 running back in the 2023 class out of Florida. He's a big, strong kid. He's a fast kid. Savion Red, guy that played slot last year. He had 6 catches for 34 yards. Didn't get a ton of playing time last year, but they moved him from slot to running back. And I feel like Savion Red is like what's that, Deebo Samuel that plays for the 49ers? I'm not a huge NFL guy, so if I totally butchered somebody's name in the NFL, I apologize. I believe his name is Deebo Samuel. Number 19. I believe his number's 19 for the 49ers. They line him up at running back. They line him up in the slot. Savion Red is a Keelan Robinson 2.0, except I think Savion Red is bigger. I think physically Savion Red is more talented than Keelan Robinson. So watch out is all I'm saying. The Texas running back room, despite the fact that they just lost 2 guys to the NFL draft, is as talented as any running back room in the country, period. And you look at recruiting, and the rich just keep on getting richer. Tashard Choice, amazing recruiter. This 2024 class, if it holds up, let's say it holds up, they've got their 2 commitments from their running backs. It'll be the second year in a row that Tashard Choice has gone out and got commitments from the top 2 backs on his board. Not the recruiting service board, but his board. Jarrett Gibson, sort of the crown jewel of that 2024 commitment class right now for running backs. Number 1 running back in the country out of IMG Florida. The other cool thing is this is the second year in a row that Texas has gone into Florida, taking the best back in the country, the best back in the state of Florida, and brought him to Texas. I don't know. I don't know what it is about Tashard Choice that these kids love, but there's something about Tashard Choice that running backs absolutely love. I feel like this is going to continue to be a theme we see year after year after year, as long as Tashard Choice is at Texas, which may not be long, sadly. They're going to be able to go out and get who they want at running back. The other commit, Christian Clark out of Phoenix, Arizona. I could not find any film on Christian Clark, and it's upsetting because I want to see what this kid's all about. I've heard some really good stuff about him, and you can read like analysts' opinions. My assumption is he's probably pretty fast. He can probably catch the ball well out of the backfield, because we're talking about Sark here. This is what Sark is looking for in running backs. He's probably powerful at the point of attack, and he can probably make you miss if he has to. So, should we be worried? Texas fans, we should not be worried about the running back room. We should have some concerns about the running back room. Let's talk a little bit about that. Not a lot of experience with this group. Out of the 5 guys we just talked about, that are going to be the 5 guys, and it's probably not even going to be 5 guys. But let's just say Steve Sarkisian figures out a way to rotate all 5 of these guys, and they stay consistent. Let's say they do what they need to do to get to playing time, right? Out of all 5 of those guys, there's only 70 carries and 28 receptions between them. The other area of concern I think you have to think about, and this is all running backs. We talked a minute ago about tight ends jumping to the collegiate level and blocking. Well, for running backs, jumping to the collegiate level is pass blocking, pass pro. Being in the right spot, being able to take on a bigger guy, stick your helmet right in his chest and stop him in his tracks. That's hard for a lot of running backs. They don't have to do that in high school that much. And when they do have to do it, they're doing it against guys that are probably not as big as them, probably not as strong as them, definitely not as fast as them. That's a completely different story when you go to the college level. You're going to be having to stick your nose in some big dudes' chests at the collegiate level. So I think the experience is a concern, and I think the pass blocking is a concern. But I do not believe that they are big enough concerns. I don't think we're going to see much drop-off at all from a production perspective. Now, nobody's going to take the ball and do what Bijan Robinson could do with the ball. Bijan Robinson, generational talent at running back. Nobody expects any of these guys to be Bijan Robinson. Steve Sarkisian doesn't expect these guys to be Bijan Robinson. The cool thing is they've all got their own thing. And we're going to get to see it this year. And here's a horn take for you guys. The 2022 running back room scored 28 rushing touchdowns. I think the 2023 running back room is going to eclipse that mark. This group of running backs will score more than 28 touchdowns on the ground. That's my horn take for today. Hold me to it. If I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, I'll come out and tell you I'm wrong. But let's talk about why I think that. First of all, this group, again, is ultra talented. It's got to be like a top 5, top 10, certainly, running back room in the country. There is so much talent there. It is unbelievable. The offensive line improvement. Rarely, unless you're an offensive lineman, which I am. I'm an ex-offensive lineman, guys. So I love the big dudes. I understand that if the big dudes don't go, all the little fast dudes that like to catch the ball and score the touchdowns, they don't get to go either. And no matter how good you are at running around with the ball in your hands, if you don't have 5 guys blocking for you, it's going to be real tough on you at the collegiate level. You can get away with that shit in high school, but you're not getting away with that in college. The O-line has improved so much for the University of Texas, and I can't wait to talk about this O-line in a couple of weeks. We'll do the wide receivers, we'll do the tight end. Oh, actually, we'll probably do the wide receivers and the tight ends together, and then we'll talk about this O-line group before we switch over to defense. I can't wait to talk about this group because To me, again, ex-offensive lineman, what Steve Sarkisian and his staff have done to get offensive linemen on campus and get really good ones on campus and then develop those guys just in the short time they've had is exciting. So the offensive line from year one under Steve Sarkisian to year two under Steve Sarkisian not only had a big facelift with personnel, but was just so much better. So you got to credit Kyle Flood for that. You got to credit Kyle Flood for making good choices, making good evaluations and saying, these are the guys I want. Because they're not landing all 5 stars. And they did have that one class that was pretty full of 5 stars on the offensive line. But it's not all 5-star guys. And so you got to credit him for not only bringing them in, because that's hard too, right? Getting them to come to school. Who the hell wants to go to Texas 2 years ago? Not a lot of elite type of guys were just lining up, knocking down the door to come to Texas 2 years ago. But they got some of them, and they developed some of them. You look at a guy like Kelvin Banks, freshman All-American. He's probably going to be an All-American this year, just a straight-out All-American. He's going to one day be a first-round draft pick. That's Kelvin Banks. That's development. That's bringing in some guys and developing them really quickly. So I expect this offensive line to just even be much better heading into 2023. That'll take some pressure off Quinn Ewers, take some pressure off that wide receiver group. I think Sark is going to be able to run the ball the way he wants to run the ball in 2023. And then we just talked about Quinn Ewers and the wide receiver group. The passing threat for this team is just going to be insane. It's going to be really tough to defend Texas defensively this year. Sort of another thing I'm concerned about when we start talking about the running back room is how do you keep that many guys happy? You know, you've got those 4 guys we've already talked about. 5 guys we've already talked about. You've got 2 more guys coming in that are elite type running backs in this 2024 class. They'll be on campus for sure next summer, but more than likely this spring. How do you keep all those guys and keep them happy? I think that's the challenge for Sark. And we talked about it on the show. We were talking about the quarterback room a little bit last week. Or not a little bit. We talked about it a lot last week. We talked a little bit about how there's some coaches that can keep guys in the program. And Steve Sarkisian's one of those guys. He did it at Alabama. He's so far doing a pretty good job of it at Texas. It'll be interesting to see who breaks out from this running back group. Because like I said, with the exception of Jonathan Brooks and Keelan Robinson to a lesser extent, his role has been more in the passing game. Jonathan Brooks is really the only guy that's carried the ball a significant amount out of this group at the collegiate level and for Texas. I am super excited to see who's going to be the breakout. Who's going to, because at the beginning of the year, you got to feel like Jonathan Brooks is going to get the nod. But then there's going to be a lot of rotation going on, especially in this Rice game, especially in this Wyoming game. We'll probably see 2 or 3 guys maybe at the Alabama game. I don't know. Hell, maybe we see them all. Maybe they all show Steve Sarkisian and Tashard Choice enough that they can trust them, even in an Alabama game. So it'll be really cool to see who busts out from that group. I would not be surprised if Jaden Blue is a guy that surprises everybody, just sort of busts on the scene. I'm sure most of you know who Jaden Blue is, but nobody knows what he can do at this point. Let's talk a little bit about this week 2 matchup with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama was 11-2 last year, and you thought the world was ending. How is Nick Saban 11-2. It was a down year. 11-2 was a down year for Nick Saban and his Alabama Crimson Tide. And there are actually Alabama fans that were talking about firing Nick Saban. I mean, it wasn't everyone. We don't need to be dramatic about it, but there were fans, Alabama fans, that started talking about who's next, which is freaking absurd in an 11-2 year. But that's how spoiled that fan base has been. That fan base has been used to going to the playoff all the time and competing for national championships and winning lots of national championships. And we talked about it on the show a little last year about, during the football season, are we kind of starting to see maybe the decline of Nick Saban? And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean he's been at Alabama for, how long has he been at Alabama? Over a decade. He's done everything you could do as a head coach. He's widely considered the greatest head coach of college football all time. And honestly, I don't know how you could argue that. I don't know who. If it's not Nick Saban, who is it? He has nothing left to prove. He's got all the money in the world. He over the course of his career at Alabama, and I'm just talking about Alabama, he has done an absolute masterful job of somehow brainwashing all of these 5-star elite athletes that he's able to recruit that they are not good enough. And he's done it with multiple groups of coaching staffs, multiple groups of players. What Nick Saban has done at Alabama is absolutely amazing, and I don't think we'll ever see it again, except for when Steve Sarkisian does it here in the next 10 or 15 years. Watch out for the next 10 or 15 years. Steve Sarkisian will be called the greatest college football coach that's ever lived. I'm saying that jokingly. Don't hold me to that one. Regardless, Alabama's 11-2 last year. That included their 20-19 win over Texas in Austin, which, let's look at some circumstances of that game. First-string quarterback gets injured in the... Man, how cursed is Texas against Alabama? From a quarterback injury perspective. Last 2 times they've played, very early in the game, our quarterback goes down. And I got to tell you, folks, I was in Austin. I was at Darrell K. Royal for that game. It was a really awesome game. Probably one of the most exciting games I've been to as a Texas fan. And as soon as Quinn Ewers got hurt, I thought we are about to get absolutely shithoused. I liked Hudson Card. I think Hudson Card has a lot of good qualities. But just the way Ewers was on fire, so, to that point in that game, I just felt like, man, Alabama's about to eat Hudson Card alive. And they didn't, man. He played he played a decent game. Regardless, we get our quarterback hurt. We missed a field goal. And then I did a TikTok video the night of that game, and I talked about this safety call. I still don't understand how that's not a safety. Does it change the outcome of the game? I don't know. I feel like Alabama probably figures out a way to get back in that one anyway, regardless of the safety. I don't know. You never can tell on things like that. But point being, 20-19 game, really close game, really probably the best game Texas has played in over a decade. And a lot of stuff went against them, and they still had a chance at the end. I think that's exciting as a Texas fan. I know the rest of the season didn't go. There was a lot of disappointments last year. But there were also some really big highs. So getting back to Bama, there's 10 returning starters, 5 on offense, 5 on defense. I think the key guys offensively for Alabama that are coming back, Jace McClellan, 7 touchdowns, 655 yards rushing. Jermaine Burton, wide receiver, 7 touchdowns, 677 yards receiving. Ja'Cory Brooks, 8 touchdowns, 674 yards receiving. So they got some firepower coming back. The defense is going to be really experienced at the defensive line positions, the linebacker positions, and the defensive back. So really a lot up the middle, right? Got Dallas Turner coming back. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is probably – I think Dallas Turner, Kool-Aid McKinstry are the 2 big name guys that are coming back for Alabama's defense. So he's having to replace a lot. 10 starters out of 22. That'll be interesting. I won't say it'll be tough for Nick Saban, but that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We know he's got talent. Still one of the best recruiters in the game. He's done it multiple times. We just talked about that. He's plugged guys in, had guys leave, brought new guys on board, and just keeps winning and keeps winning and keeps winning. Man, you got to think, though, at some point, in the back of my head, if I'm an Alabama fan, I got to be thinking at some point, that's not going to work. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, there's going to be a season where the wheels come off for Nick Saban. And I think as much as Alabama fans want to believe that was last year, I don't think it was last year. And I'm not saying it's going to be this year either. But I'll tell you this year is looking like the most vulnerable Alabama football has looked in a very long time. Again, what does that mean in terms of what actually happens on the field? I have no idea. We're going to find out here in a few weeks, right? I think more important than who is coming back for Alabama is who is not coming back for Alabama. And obviously, the big one is Bryce Young, 2021 Heisman Trophy winner, really high NFL draft pick. Bryce Young's a guy that without Bryce Young, Alabama does not beat Texas last year in Austin. He had a couple of really big plays late in that game that sealed the deal for Alabama. Jahmyr Gibbs, almost 1,000 yards rushing, 7 touchdowns. I didn't realize this about Jahmyr Gibbs. 44 catches for 444 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's some serious production out of the backfield receiving. 3 of their offensive linemen are out. Gone. That started on that team last year. And then another big one is Will Anderson. Another first-round draft pick. How many first-round draft picks does Nick Saban have right now in his career? And let's just narrow it down to Alabama. I don't know the answer. It's got to be ridiculous. So the big question for Alabama is, like, who the hell plays quarterback? They brought in Tyler Buckner, transfer, whose numbers last year were just ass. Like, I mean, that's like the best way I know to say it. And then you got Jalen Milroe, who, man, I really like Jalen Milroe's athleticism. I've only seen him play. I saw him play. I think it was the Arkansas game that we saw him come in and play a little bit. He had whatever game I'm thinking of, he had a really long run for, I believe, a touchdown. If it wasn't a touchdown, it was a plus 60-yard type play. And it happened in a hurry. So he's got, I mean, he's athletic, right? I don't know how well he can spin the football. And I'm not saying he can. I just don't know. But the question remains, who's going to win the job between those two? And then who can hold on to the job? I think this is probably like the first time since Nick Saban got that machine at Alabama really rolling that he doesn't know who's going to be the quarterback, and he doesn't have a really good plan for that, and the team doesn't know who's going to be the quarterback. And I think quarterback at the collegiate level is huge, especially when you're talking about these offenses that are really centered around quarterback play. So I think for Texas, we talked a little bit about Bama, who they're bringing back, who they're not bringing back, how this game's shaping up. I think for Texas, this is one of those next step type of games. So Steve Sarkisian came to Texas, had a really bad first season on the field, but recruited really well. Year 2, he has a pretty decent year on the field. 8-5. Huge win over Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl at the Red River Shootout. Really close game against an Alabama team that was, even though they were 11-2 and it was the end of the world, still a really good team. Alabama was a couple of plays away from being undefeated and playing in a national championship again. Sometimes you win those, sometimes you don't, right? Last year they didn't. So to me, the next step for Texas is show you can go out and win these types of games. Show you can go out and win 10 games, 11 games, play for and win your conference championship, maybe get into the playoff, and then show up. Maybe not necessarily win your first game. Maybe you do win your first game, maybe not win a national champ, but show up and be competitive, right? On a national level. That's Texas's next step. And regardless of where Alabama's program is today or how that team ends up in 2023, going on the road and beating Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide in a place where I think, they've only lost I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's 10 games. It's almost no games since Nick Saban has been there have they lost at home. So Steve Sarkisian taking this team on the road to Tuscaloosa, and if they can find a way to win that game, that is a huge next step type game for Texas. And I was on the Spurs Up show a couple weeks ago. Chris asked me, what do you think Texas can do this season? And I said, I think if Texas can win that Alabama game, I think Texas could, not will, not would, but could go undefeated. I think winning that game for the Texas program is the type of springboard. It's kind of like, I always think back to the 2009 national championship game where Alabama is, Texas had been on the scene for a while. And Alabama was just now getting on the scene, right? And I that team probably didn't know if it could compete going into that national championship game. You see really good teams go through this process, right? Where you're building a team, you have a good team, but you still quite don't really know how good you are or how good you can be. I think this Texas team is starting to get in that type of space. So going on the road, winning a game like that could definitely go, the light could come on for this Texas team. Losing this game, I don't think it wouldn't be the end of the world. As long as they go and they're competitive, losing this game would be, to me, like losing the game last year. Nobody expected Texas to even play anywhere close to Alabama last year. Alabama's a 7.5-point favorite right now in this game. Nobody expects Texas to go win this game. So a loss, I don't think it hurts anything. I think if Alabama beats Texas in Tuscaloosa, I think everything is still out in front of Texas. But I think winning it could definitely be a pretty big deal for the Texas program, Steve Sarkisian. I'm not going to do a prediction on this game right now, but I will say this. I have a really good feeling about this Texas team, and I think it would not surprise me at all if Texas walks into Tuscaloosa, plays a hell of a football game, just like they played a hell of a football game last year in Austin, and finds a way to walk out of Tuscaloosa with a win against Alabama, it wouldn't surprise me at all. You will not see me doing any like, oh my God, I can't believe this TikToks or tweets if Texas walks into Tuscaloosa and wins that game. I think this team is confident. I think the coaching staff is confident. I think they finally have the pieces they need to go compete at a very high level. So that's our Alabama sort of preview, and we'll do more the week of the game, obviously. Let's talk a little bit more about this Horn Takes Traveling Roadshow. So last week I announced, man, we're going on the road. We're going to Tuscaloosa. I got the tickets. I got my hotel room. I got a parking pass. And I asked folks, what do I need to do in Tuscaloosa? And so far, all the feedback I've got is Tuscaloosa's a shithole. And if you live in Tuscaloosa, please don't take offense to that. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I've heard. I've been told to stay on campus. Do not venture away from campus for this game. So, what is there to do on campus? Do we have a good tailgating scene in Tuscaloosa? If so, where is that located? Where should I go to find that? What types of pregame festivities do the Alabama Crimson Tide have? I'm sure there's some kind of, meet the player thing, or like maybe not meet the player, but watch the players come in. I'm sure there's some kind of like parade type shit with the band and the cheerleaders and a giant elephant or something. There's got to be something like that. So Alabama fans, let me know what to do if I stay on campus, because I'm bringing some equipment and I'm going to interview some folks and I'm going to try to just report on what it's like to be at this football game in Tuscaloosa. We're going to do the same thing at the Red River Shootout, and we're going to do the same thing down in Austin for the Texas Tech game the day after Thanksgiving. Join us next time on Horn Takes Live. We'll talk some more recruiting updates. Hopefully we'll have some more commits. We'll have some more clarity on when some of the guys that haven't committed yet will be committing. We'll talk about this wide receiver room and the tight ends. We'll break down the Wyoming matchup. Subscribe to the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, or you can go to horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com. It's my little Buzzsprout webpage, and all the episodes go up there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the bell to get the notifications, folks. If you're watching this right now, please, 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 if you're on my TikTok, please go to YouTube and subscribe to the channel. Find me on Twitter and Facebook at Horn Takes. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your comments, questions, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a really good weekend. Hook 'em.